customer service at all times.
I always do. I never deliver anything less.
Like most customer service colleagues who just never deliver. Boom. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this definitely not made for children under the age of 13 IRL podcast for FailcastF1. Woo.
Yeah, definitely not made for children, in case the EU were listening.
Definitely. My name is Mr. Valkenberg. Alongside me, as always, spouting and touting was what I was trying to say. His new call centre look is Mr. Taco Friendly Esteban. How are you doing, good sir?
I am doing excellently, despite being rained on my way to the show. So I'm sat here now in slightly moist denim, but you know, it's a good look. Wet look jeans. I think it could be another case where I've been a pioneer of fashion. Maybe this look will outlast even my long life. We are at Monaco, which we both despise. I have a very, very nasty habit of qualifying very well here,
Yes.
and then fucking it up. And naturally, that will be what is happening today. But it does mean Monaco tends to be a good episode for the old chit-chat, because we've got nothing to lose. There's no tension.
That's
really.
true. Whereas I have zero pace around Monaco, but can generally like hodgepodge it home eventually, minus a few front wings. So between us, we've kind of got a midfield running going on somewhere along the line. Hi, Manna. Thanks for joining. Hope you're well.
What tyres do I want?
Oh, now the warm up here is less dramatic this year, isn't it? Because it was always about the tyre temperatures that would fuck up, wasn't it, in the previous games?
Yeah, I'm going to go balanced, but to be honest with you, I think I want to be on the harder tyres in the race.
Same.
For sure.
I was just thinking that.
Anyway, I had something to tell you, and it's completely gone from my. Oh, that was it. So I want to share another Berlin story with you, if I may.
Yes.
I know everyone loves these.
I live for these things.
So, there's. I hesitate to call it a tradition, but there is. Let's call it a tendency. Actually, I'm going to go for my high downforce setup, which is slower, but that doesn't really matter to me. Sorry, already off on a tangent. So there's something that happens that I've only seen happen in Berlin, but I know it happens in other places. It must do. It must. Many years ago, I was out with some people from work. I think it was. I think I was on our way to a Christmas market somewhere, and we were in the train station and we're going up the escalator, and there was a woman a few steps ahead of us, and she was, I don't know, maybe early 40s. Maybe, I guess. Maybe had one or two bits to drink. And just casually, out of nowhere, decided to drop her underwear and tights and just take a crap on the escalator. and having talked to quite a few other Berliners, it turns out this happens quite a lot. Now, what happened to me maybe about 2 weeks ago now is I got into a train. Everything was fine. I was stood by the door being antisocial, looking at my phone, as you do, and suddenly I got hit by a whiff of urine. Quite a rich, heady hit of urine smell. And I thought,
well fermented.
I thought, I'm definitely on a public transport network. This is sort of ode to public transport. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, as anyone would, okay, well, there's probably just been an elderly person getting in everyone's way, and you know. They've gone now. I'm sure the smell will pass. But actually, the smell got stronger and stronger and stronger. And suddenly I realised, between the glass partition and myself, there was a man who had fallen asleep in his own lap and was sort of slowly dispensing urine down his trouser legs onto the floor.
No.
Yes. And now, this is something that actually happens a lot. Because I went into work and I was talking to people about it, and everyone had a story of this happening, and I don't know why it happens here. so much more than anywhere else. But wait, it gets better. So we're having this conversation, about 5 of us having a coffee at the office, and we're talking about all our horrible experiences of people peeing themselves on public transport or doing a dump on the escalator, or my personal favourite, at an Oktoberfest market a few years ago, one of my colleagues was taking her son round to look at the stalls, and there was a guy who was simultaneously vomiting and crapping out in public. Like, pants down,
hell?
and it was just like doubled over, and he was just shooting it out of both ends.
That is glorious to behold.
Nice. As we're having this conversation, and I'm just completely staggered by how commonplace this seems to be, one of my other colleagues arrives at the office and apologises for being late, saying that he got on the train at his usual getting on the train place, sat down, like thrown himself down, because it's quite a violent rush for the seats on the early morning commute, right? So you plonk your arse down with a sort of devil-may-care attitude that was previously only seen in World War I fighter pilots. And so he throws himself down onto this leather-clad chair, bench thing, only to find that immediately his trousers soak through, and he's sat in a warm puddle of piss. It soaks through his jeans, through his underwear, into his shirt, into his coat, everything. He's too late to get up before the doors close, so he has to ride one stop to get off, to change to a train in the other direction, to go home and change before coming back to work. And I just thought I'd share that with all our lovely viewers and yourself, just in case anybody has had a particularly crappy day, because I'm pretty sure it wasn't as crappy as that.
That is grim as fuck.
And obviously, I know I'm not really selling the city here. It's not like I'm going to get an offer from the tourist board. Please, Ben, please let me put this anecdote onto a radio show, and we'll play it for all the tourists. Like, that's just not going to happen.
It reminds me of oh, come on. I'm trying to be nice and letting everyone through, and they're just smashing into each other. Vettel. The best story that I can have of that London-wise, oh my god, Sebastian Vettel.
Has he done it again, that naughty boy?
Oh, well, I've taken Hamilton out of the session.
Oh, good man.
And Lando Norris. Well, that was interesting, is all I will say to that. The best, Manu was saying 5 front wings to go. Was that during the race or just qualifying, mate? The best pooing on transport session I've ever had.
Oh, this could be a new segment of the show.
Yeah.
Pooing on public transport. If you have a pooing on public transport story, please do send it in to us. You can reach me at definitelyzero@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. Anyway, please carry on.
New user segment. I love it. So I live on the gap between London and Stansted Airport. So we have the Stansted Express come through, which means that you get lots of people who are travelling through who aren't necessarily English and get a bit confused on things. And there was 2 stories kind of going on at the same time, and I was busy watching one story where one foreign family had half got on the train and half hadn't, and was busy watching their mother, is what I can only assume, being left behind at Tottenham Hale as they were going along with some bags, and then like the son and like the daughter and the dad like smashing on the doors as it was all going away. So I was like, oh, Swiss Family Robinson, watching that family ripped apart by Transport for London. And I was like, oh, well, that was dramatic. So they're all like crying on one side of the train, and then on the other side was just a very angry woman who had clearly been on, when they've been on that night out and you can see the skirt has ridden up all of the leg and is not really just showing the beef flaps. And I was like, well, this is gorge. But yeah, she shat herself on the train, picked it up in her knickers and threw it in my direction.
What?
Missed. And then she collapsed on the floor. It was about a year ago. Year and a half, something like that. one of my many. It was pretty much that story that sparked me to no longer put my travel commute woes on Facebook, because my mum was she's like, I thought you was going to die of terrorism. Now you're just going to die of random people.
Yeah, I imagine she'd be writing you every day, just saying, "Buy a car, just buy a car." Yeah. Welcome to this week's episode of the Crapping on Public Transport podcast. We're going to move on to some Formula One in just a moment, but I really do feel I have to engage with Simon on this topic. That is
crapping on teammates.
That is an incredible story, and I want to thank you for sharing it. It does make me wonder how we ever got this far as a species. It really does.
That is very true. That is very true. All I can remember is that because I had to get rounder to get off the train when I got to Harlow Town, and there was a collection of empty Bacardi Breezers and WKDs, and I was like, you got pissed on that to be able to get this like 3%. I've had stronger Cokes.
Well, it's the favoured beverage of hard-hitting journalists and emeritus professors the world over. So I'm sure she'd spent a lovely evening discussing the merits of Charlotte Bronte's work and had a few tipples, and things just got a little out of hand. Left the Merc at a professor's office and just decided to train it, slum it on the way home. I do wonder if I should go out again now while it's quiet, or if I wait for the track to get faster.
I'm going out now because it was so Vettel turned me round, and then when I was trying to spin turn it back, I took out Norris and Hamilton. So there's only 18 that's going to be able to set a time.
To wrap out the start of the show, which is nothing to do with Formula One, I do want to share another story with you. This didn't happen to me, but I did see it pop up online, and maybe other people have seen it. It's an incident at a popular chain of restaurants in the United States, where a lady had walked in, and it's funny how often women are doing this, actually. Because I would have thought this would...
You're going to mention as well.
You'd think this would be a guy thing, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But never mind.
Yeah. We're the filthy lot.
Yeah. But anyway, she goes into this chain of restaurants, is denied access to the toilets because she's not a customer. So she just unbuckles her pants, takes a crap against the wall, and then throws it at the kitchen staff.
Yes.
And this got me thinking as well, because much like the incidents we've already talked about, a lot has to go wrong for that to happen. Like, there's many events that take place at any point during the process. You could think to yourself, what am I doing? Like the moment the idea first occurs to you, maybe you think, is this a really good look for me? Probably not. The moment you reach down to your belt, that's already where you should be questioning yourself quite strongly,
There are so many points where that could have stopped.
Yeah.
But no, she kept going.
So there you go, everybody. That's the world we live in, a world where teammates take each other off and people crap in public spaces for no explicable reason. Just none. So
I really hoped with that lady that it was like a proper Klinger-on strainer, so she was like proper staring at the kitchen staff, just like eyes bulging, going. It was like just...
Unfortunately, there's no sound recording of the event.
Or they could just overlay it with Sebastian Vettel's post-collision German angst. That I would like.
Speaking of which, there's plenty of that that will be coming up. But yes, this is, believe it or not, the Failcast F1 podcast, an F1 podcast with F1 news and opinion. We have very much to talk about, but first of all, I would like to send a birthday shout-out to your favourite and mine. Mr. Lando Norris turned 20 since we last went live. He is but a mere baby. I enjoyed his birthday cake, his milk carton-shaped birthday cake from McLaren. That's really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
And I want to talk very quickly about the phenomenal turnaround that McLaren have had this year, and how much I am loving the Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz teammate ship / bromance. It's like I was saying yesterday. It's like Carlos is his older brother. It's so cool seeing all the behind the scenes stuff with them. The fact that they're able to get along so well and contribute to such a positive atmosphere inside the team. But most of all, I mean, Andreas Seidel arriving at the team from Audi, Volkswagen fame, I don't know if he can be solely responsible for this turnaround. However, wouldn't you say that this has been an absolutely remarkable year for McLaren? And one in which I'd be tempted in our end-of-season awards to give them Team of the Year.
Agree, absolutely agree, because particularly as we were saying beforehand, don't go for the Renault.
Yeah.
So I'd already kind of committed them this year to being essentially just ahead of Williams, and that was all it was ever gonna be. So my expectations versus where they've been is really, really low. It's also made me really evaluate actually. Well, it's the first time that I've seen two teammates getting along so well that's pushing a team forward together through that kind of camaraderie and enjoyment rather than pitching people up against each other. And you can already see Sky Sports when the press come along, like Ted Kravitz and all those people, they're going, this friendship can't last forever because they're hating it. Because they're like, no, I want to rip you apart. And I think that's going to be really interesting if the team continues on its upward trajectory to ensure that they stay positive with each other when podiums are a regular occurrence, and they're not going to have Lando going emo and stuff like that afterwards. But yeah, absolutely Team of the Year. And I can't remember the last time that we had such a massive step forward outside of a regulation change for a team.
No, me neither. And as you correctly say, for this to happen with Renault power is what's absolutely staggering to me. I think the team have done phenomenal work in all respects. Even their livery looks better than last year.
Yes.
I do kind of agree with Sky Sports that maybe some tension will arise between the drivers going forward. But right now, the drivers having the dynamic they do is only adding to the positive atmosphere inside the team, which is helping drive them forward and get these results that they very richly deserve. And honestly, I think the other thing I'm really happy to see, and it's something that you and I have predicted for quite a long time, seeing Carlos Sainz emerge as such a natural leader.
Yeah.
Such a completely well-rounded, capable driver, and one who's a genuine challenger for the future.
He's really blossomed into the freedom that McLaren have given him, and I wouldn't have necessarily given McLaren as a team to give freedom. No. Which has been a complete breath of fresh air, like top down. And yeah, he's absolutely grown. And it's funny to see in the comments on the YouTube videos as well. They're like, Carlos Sainz was driver of the day, but no one saw him because he's just doing it and getting on with it. And hopefully Brazil is kind of like the moment where everyone wakes up if they hadn't already realised just how much of a good job he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, he had the misfortune to be paired with Verstappen, of course, which led to him being completely overlooked. I mean, not just a little bit, just completely overlooked, despite them being the two closest match teammates on the grid. And yet, you know, Max gets all the plaudits and attention. Last year, he already started to show. I mean, obviously, he did a stellar job at Toro Rosso, but seeing him already at Renault last year, sticking it to Verstappen at Azerbaijan, for example, which was my highlight of the year, he was already showing what he could do once he was out from that sort of oppressive blanket of Red Bull counterculture. You know, like Red Bull don't really run their driver development like any other driver development. It's totally brutal, and for me, I sort of think I actually was disappointed when he got kicked out of Renault, because you and I were talking about how happy he seemed to be to get out of Red Bull and be at Renault, and what a good fit for the team he seemed to be, and how he was able to deliver. He had a lot of bad luck with incidents that were sort of beyond his control. But actually, the whole McLaren thing, I could not agree more. He's just immediately installed himself as the leader of that team, and that's good because it takes pressure off Lando. I'm sure over time it may come to grate on Lando, because let's not forget how truly talented Lando Norris is. And once he's had another season under his belt, I'm sure the gap we've seen between him and Carlos will evaporate. But Carlos just seems so screwed on, clear-headed, confident, but not arrogant. Very, very adaptable, quietly getting his head down and getting the job done. That's exactly what you need as a leader of a team that's on a recovery trajectory. But to then have those qualities and be able to consistently outdrive the car, a car that often has no business at all being in fourth place. Let's be quite frank. And I think Lando's pace is more representative of the car itself. I have to say, hands down, like, McLaren have struck gold there, and maybe it's something to do with Zach Brown changing the culture. We've got a question as well about how we think Alonso's retirement has affected the dynamic. I think it definitely has. Alonso had that team in a chokehold, more or less.
Yeah.
And nothing happened without his say-so. And I think, in a sense, it's a freeing of both parties, right? Because McLaren are free of Alonso, and Carlos Sainz is free of the corporate culture that he's never really struggled to adapt to, but I think has maybe prevented him from delivering his best.
Yeah, completely agree. Comment in the chat there from Manhouse. I don't think Lando wants to be the team leader, not yet at least, which is why it's quite amicable as well. Which I guess when you're new in, you don't want to. There is a stepping stone process for you taking that kind of through. No, I completely agree. The problem with Lando is it's his way, his team, and that limits it to be a one car operation. It also means that you're like, he could wrestle a car out and get the best out of a botch of a job, but maybe not be able to finesse it so that actually a team could function all of its way through. So when you don't have that there, and you have to actually look at the efficiency of a team, how you work together across two garages, all of that kind of stuff, I think that's really, really helped McLaren move forward. Plus, Alonso is a bad PR magnet now, and the amount of poison and bad blood that must be. I can only speak from experience in the job that I do. I absolutely detest going to work 9 to 5. I'm very good at my job, but for fuck's sake, I'm sitting there going, I want to go home. I hate this. This is all shit. I work in a political job. That's why I'm just like, for goodness sake, give me an election, please. But like, I must be a complete drain on everyone around me because I sit there wishing that I wasn't there all day, and it must ooze out everywhere to everywhere else around them. And I think Alonso is like that, but he's got such a massive personality, it just seeps into everything, and to have that completely wiped away, fresh engine, fresh drivers, Seedle, Zach Brown being allowed to just be jolly fat controller, great.
Yeah, I mean, again, I couldn't agree more. I know it's a bit boring when we totally agree with each other, but do you think Alonso's legacy has been damaged? Partly by his failure to qualify at Indy, but also he's been the common denominator now in a lot of quite high-profile failures. Mm-hmm. I mean, his admittedly more developed GP2 engine has won races and podiums this year. Carlos Sainz seems to be I would say Carlos Sainz is a far more adaptable driver. I'm not gonna say he's a better driver, of course, because the proof's in the pudding and there's a whole career ahead of him. But the thing that again impresses me very much about Carlos is every time he's changed teams, he's immediately got up to speed. Don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah.
When he changed mid-season to Renault, it was just done.
And straight in.
In the end, he hauled Renault up above his former team.
Yeah.
Single-handedly. So Whereas Alonso, you're right, it needs to be his way, and I wonder if it truly does need to be his way. Like, I know he outdrove the Minardi, but just because the Minardi was bad doesn't mean it didn't have characteristics that suited him. And I want to get your take on this now. Was he the factor that maybe held Ferrari back?
Agree.
I mean, all these question marks
agree.
come up now, and I don't really want to piss on the guy's legacy. And he is very highly regarded, and deservedly so. But I do wonder if there's a shadow behind his glory a little bit, and that he.
And I would say yes. Oh shit! I've just ruined someone's lap. Never mind.
At least it's not your own.
No, that's true. He's going to ruin mine, though, bitch. No, so for me, how do I explain? For me, what it's done is it's split Alonso's legacy into two different, distinct talents, and so what it hasn't done for me is harm his legacy as being a fearless, competent, brave, decisive, calculated and manipulative driver, as are all the best. When you think of your Schumachers and your Sennas and your Prosts, they've all got those kind of things that calculate them out. What it has shown for me, though, and admittedly this is going to be very much down to lots of other circumstances, is that Alonso completely lacked the business acumen to be, the business prowess or business personality to be able to make, not best of a bad situation, but to be able to pull everything around him. I can't think of other drivers that have had a career that has been so, like, two-toned. Mansell, went off to Indy, won that properly, came back to the Williams, had a good time, terrible at the McLaren, obviously, for his final little hurrah, but still very much could build a team around him and go off and do other things like BTCC and stuff like that. Whereas Alonso, his only other success outside of F1 so far has been entering into a one-car championship in GT to win. And you're right, when you look at McLaren, that didn't work out because he had an upstart person that they'd already invested more time into, with Hamilton starting. So out he went. It wasn't his. Went to Renault, tried to make it his. What did that spark off? A scandal that put Piquet Jr. in the wall. Went to Ferrari. No driver is bigger than that team. 5 years of failure. Goes to McLaren. I can't work with all of these people doing all of these things. Out I go because I'm refusing to integrate Japanese and Eastern culture with Spanish hot-blooded culture. Out he goes. To me, it separates the man who's the driver on the track from the person that can actually make a cohesive, collaborative experience off the track, and that's where he failed miserably, for me, personally. But stick him in a car where everyone's the same and he'll wipe the arse off you.
I think that's a very fair analysis. It's a shame, really, that we've come to see him in this light. And, I'll be honest, I have to say I was glad when he stepped back, because I think if the decision had been Zak Brown's, Carlos Sainz would have been out of Formula One this year. Because Lando was always groomed for that seat, and Zak Brown seemed to have a real...
hard on.
Yeah, I was going to say a real boner for Fernando. In a way that I found...
the commercial way that he brings stuff in theory.
Yeah. And, Renault wanted Ricciardo. I don't think the door at Red Bull would really have been open for Sainz because they'd already decided Gasly was the next hot ticket.
Yeah.
Maybe we would have had Sainz back at Toro Rosso, which would have denied us Alex Albon, who's someone else I really want to talk about later. Mm-hmm. But the point is that it just shows, doesn't it, how sometimes you've got to cut away the old to make way for the new. And I'm just happy to see McLaren and both its drivers seizing this opportunity and getting the most out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's not helped that they've had like the complete clean sweep, Christ, across the board, because then it removes any trace of I still wish. And the only thing that kind of annoyed me, and I know it annoyed you as well, was when they put him in for a test, and I was like, don't fuck us about with this. And I'm glad that was almost like just a publicity PR stunt. Because the last thing I wanted was him to then go, oh, it's all good now, I'll come back and reap everyone else's rewards, thanks. Because actually that would make me feel even more of a dent into his career, so to speak. It would almost be like I'm trying to think of another example, but it would be like Vettel going, I'm tired of making all of these driver errors, I'm going to take 2 years off and I'll come back in 2021 when Leclerc's built up that team around me and I'll have that drivers' championship. Cheers.
And I'm hearing what you're saying, and you're completely right. Because I don't know if you noticed, but after he had that test, he was making a lot of comments to the press about, oh yeah, I could come back to Formula One.
Mm-hmm.
And that set the alarm bells ringing for me. I mean, thankfully, McLaren have re-signed both their drivers, and they've learned a valuable lesson, I think. The fact that also they recognise what Sainz was bringing. Because I think Lando would always have got 2 years, no matter what. Yeah. And the fact that Lando has driven at a level that I think was probably above what they were expecting for a first season. Like, I think Carlos has maybe, because Carlos has driven so strongly, people shouldn't think that Lando's driven poorly. For a rookie season, I think he's had a very, very strong one.
Definitely.
But I think he would have got a second season regardless, because he was McLaren's protege. But the fact that they've been prepared to recognise Sainz's contribution so quickly and say, yep, signing him up again. I'm happy, because I honestly thought the spectre of Fernando Alonso coming back to McLaren was a very real thing to worry about.
Definitely. And I think it must be so liberating for that team as well to feel like it's a happy place to work again, because I can't imagine that have been a happy place to work when you've got that negativity going around all the time, unless you're all just sadists. Because what was the thing on the other side? Mr. Personality Waffle going off on one, who actually outside of F1 seems to be quite a nice and normal bloke actually, but he was drowned in that team because he was never given the opportunity to breathe because of the chokehold of Alonso was wrapped around it at all times. So and it reminds me a little bit of the fact that Williams has become also quite a negative place, and the way how they've been able to kind of keep going is that George Russell was sitting there being pragmatic, open, honest, transparent. Kubica's trying to turn what has been a miserable season into a happy fairy tale story, and maybe if they can stop being so emo over everything and keep working on the problems, maybe there's hope for them as well.
I'm really hoping that the formula change is kind to Williams, and we'll definitely come on to them. Last word on the McLaren points that you were making, though. I think morale is definitely a big factor, and it does seem to be improving. Sort of winds of change blowing through. I think definitely Van Dorn suffered from being there during the collapse of corporate McLaren.
Yes.
Obviously it's still a corporation, but you know what I mean? Like, he came into old school, end of the Ron Dennis era McLaren, even though Zak Brown was already in charge.
Yeah.
They'd inherited, this is the way McLaren do things. That being paired with Alonso, I think was always going to make life difficult for him. That said, I would argue he's possibly the most forgettable driver I've ever seen in Formula One.
He's definitely up there, especially on a grid with just 20 drivers on. It was wasn't spectacularly bad, wasn't spectacularly good, but turned up and got his tick in the box. Also, another point that just popped into my head as I was popping back into the pits, and I'd be interested in your take on it. It's taken that many years for McLaren to do a clean sweep of everything that they've done to get themselves set up to make a platform for step forward of improvements. Do you think that Daniel Ricciardo will still be kicking about doing it in 4 years' time for Renault, trying to get that team up to a step of improvements? Because they seem like they're at base camp now that McLaren are halfway up the mountain.
I'm so glad you asked me that question, because I've been having this exact same thought. And honestly, it was like flipping a coin. Because if you go back to last year, and the rumours were that Daniel was thinking of leaving Red Bull, but it hadn't been confirmed.
Yes.
And we had a conversation on the podcast, and I said there and then, either go to Renault or go to McLaren and make those teams yours, because those are the only opportunities you're going to have to be a lead driver and the championship contender. And at the time, I admit, I erred on the side of Renault, because who could have predicted McLaren's turnaround this year, really?
Exactly.
I saw McLaren more as a long-term project, but I was like, those are the two teams where a driver like Daniel Ricciardo can make the difference, and it will be his team. And I have to say, I think he's done a phenomenal job at Renault. I think he's outdriven the car quite a bit. Obviously, he's not had sort of the go for glory results, but if you look at his season as a whole, yeah, you could argue disappointing compared to the results he was getting with Red Bull, but compared to where the car really is, I think he's done a solid job. It took the first quarter of the season before he felt comfortable in the car, but I think you can allow that. And eventually he got there, unlike Gasly, because Gasly can drive the balls off that Toro Rosso, but he cannot get the Red Bull into the window. However, I've just noticed they've put Albon in the Red Bull in the latest patch.
Yeah.
Didn't even notice.
Because if you're already in a career mode, they don't change it unless you start a new career mode, and then you can have it swapped over.
It's getting tight at the front. The top 10 all within basically half a second of each other.
It is a bit scary. Well, mind you, Albon still doesn't get through to Q2.
That poor boy.
Where did Smazley? Oh, Smazley didn't get through Q1. Oh, there we go. It's all right. Red Bull normality is restored.
Universal balance is restored. So it could have gone either way. Honestly, I don't know what Daniel does now. As far as I can see, he's probably going to have to wait until the formula change regardless.
Yep.
And I'm not even sure he can get out of his contract then, because I don't know if they signed him for 3 years or not. I mean, I'd be surprised if he signed a 3-year deal, but maybe he did. You never know. He and his manager were suing each other over this contract, so someone's not happy with something. That said, I think also, depending on what happens next year with the car, what happens with Ocon, and whether Renault stay in the sport at all, because Renault their board are very concerned about what it's costing, and I could see them pulling out. Rumour is that Mercedes may pull out, and I know Mercedes are denying it, but the Mercedes, I think it was their annual general meeting, the Daimler one, was broadcast on TV here in Germany. I actually caught part of it. And they were announcing that they needed to make something like $1.5 billion of savings. And we're laying off a lot.
I wonder where a large chunk of that could come from.
And I was thinking, I wonder where a large chunk of that could come from. And then there was the rumour that Penske were in negotiations to buy the F1 team.
Yes, I've heard this.
Now, I could go either way on that, because Penske have dropped a lot of money recently. They've definitely bought IMSA.
Yeah, they bought Indy.
Yeah. Indy and IMSA.
And the whole Indy car. Yeah.
So they've been splashing the cash. So I could believe
the Indy
it.
circuit.
But the rumor is that Mercedes would withdraw as a works team, and they would go back to being an engine supplier. Now, if you remember, when it was announced that McLaren was switching back to Mercedes, that already started rumours that they were reigniting that old relationship because Mercedes were going to pull out as a works team. And, Toto Wolff denied it and everything. But I would also like to point out that Toto Wolff wasn't at the last Grand Prix, and Toto Wolff is also heading up the Mercedes Formula E team.
Which kicks off this weekend.
Yeah, and Formula E is full of world-class manufacturers. It seems to be the way the car industry is moving. Call me paranoid, and everybody should get their tinfoil hats at the ready. Call me paranoid, but there are a lot of events here that on their own don't really mean very much, but start to make a little pattern in the stars. That tell me that we very well may find ourselves Renault-less entirely and with Mercedes only as an engine supplier. That would be bad news bears for the sport. And because, let's not forget that Honda's continued participation is by no means guaranteed.
No.
That's under review this year as well.
Yeah, they're deciding the next couple of weeks, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so, the fact that they nearly got a 1-2-3 at the last Grand Prix is probably going to help the case.
Yes.
But
although what I would say is that even they need to be careful on that as well, because if you wipe the floor with everything, then it becomes almost futile in staying in, because then your value of the win becomes less. So great for now, but long term it needs to switch it up a bit.
Yeah, so, who even knows what's going to happen with all this? And all of this plays into what happens with Daniel Ricciardo's career. And I know it's a very convoluted way of saying it. The only way out for him that I can honestly see, based on what we know in the here and now, is to replace a retiring Sebastian Vettel, which is looking less and less likely. Or at least a voluntarily retiring Sebastian Vettel is looking less and less likely, because I blame him for the collision the other day, but we'll talk about that later.
Definitely.
Or to replace Lewis at maybe Penske, if things pan out that way, because I don't see him getting in at McLaren now, not for a few years at least, based on what we know today. Red Bull, I think the doors are firmly closed. So I'm kind of struggling to see where he could go that would be a step up. At least he's in a works team right now. What are your thoughts on where he's going to go? Because surely he can't be happy where he is.
No. But I don't really know where else he could go either. He's kind of made his bed and laid in it. And I can only see him going... wouldn't it be awkward if he went back to Red Bull with his tail between his legs and was like, oh, soz everyone? But that would only happen if Verstappen got annoyed and left. And it would have to trigger a proper merry-go-round of driver changes, of which he would not be the first one to instigate any of it. So then that kind of loses you driver power in the power rankings. I think he's stuck with Renault for the foreseeable. The only other thing I can think of would be if Campos were actually worthwhile coming along and there was something new and he was like, do you know what, I'm going to cove a line in it or something, Glock it. But I think that's too high risk and it's another step down again. And I don't see him going for it.
The weird thing is in all this is that I still don't think he should have stayed at Red Bull. Even knowing what I know now, I think he's better at Renault coming in, the positions he is, than he would be tussling it with Max. in a team that was never going to be his. And credit where it's due as well to Max Verstappen, because his dad is desperate to get him out of that team from everything I read. And Max is like, no, perfectly happy. Max has really blossomed, actually, and I have to give absolute respect to the fact that the problem I always had with him was his lack of patience and maturity, and he seems to have addressed that. The fact that he admitted his fault when he lost pole position a few races back, where he just held his hands up and said, yep, didn't slow for the yellow flags, that's on me. I had to give credit where it was due. That was the right thing to do, and I was pleased to see him do it. I think he's probably been the driver of the season for me. And he just seems happy at Red Bull. He just seems content there, and there's nothing wrong with showing a bit of loyalty. So, well done to him, and I think it shows that Daniel was extra right to get out of that environment, because the prodigal son has come good, and not only has he come good, but he's gelling in the team. He seems to be getting on very well with Albon. So the Red Bull don't have the headache that they had before of two drivers who were constantly trying to drive on the same bit of track. And I think, to be honest, they've learned the lesson that Ferrari seem to have forgotten, which is it's very hard to have two alpha drivers in the team. So, all things considered, I think he was right to leave. He's arguably hitched his horse to the wrong wagon, but at least he's got a wagon.
Yeah, unlike his teammate, Nico Hülkenberg.
That was a nice segue.
That was. It's almost like we've been doing this for 10 years. such expertise. He says, forgetting the word expertise. I was trying to
describe his expertise. It's good. It's good. I like it.
Yeah. Because, and this is the problem with, which interestingly, Formula E is not having, now that it's increased its grid to 24, F1 is still only at 20, and so doors shut very quickly, people have long memories, makes it very difficult for people to then go, oh, well, you can come here and you can go there. And Nico Hülkenberg's definitely the issue of that when you're trying to buy up teams, because you can't go back to old stalwarts at Force India, because Perez basically brought that team back to life, and Daddy Stroll pays for the other seat. And he can't go to Sauber because that's currently under the we've not sold any cars but we'll have an F1 team anyway, Alfa Romeo. And he's not French. And that kind of ruins the rest of the grid out for Mr. Midfield Hülkenberg, who has got nowhere to go. So, Ricciardo should kind of count his stars lucky, so to speak. The Hülkenberg thing, though, for me is a real dilemma, because I honestly get the feeling he's not coming back. I don't think he's coming back either.
And that feels like I don't know, it feels to me like there's unfinished business in his career. Like, how a driver like that can finish his career without a podium is beyond comprehension to me. Completely. I would have pipped you for second, but I invalidated my lap time.
Oh no!
But it's fine, we are at the sharp end of the action.
Which has never happened at Monaco, so
no.
Be prepared for this to all go horribly wrong. The problem for me with Hülkenberg, so I'd argue that there's been quite a lot of drivers, admittedly in the tumultuous 90s and late 80s era, where drivers there was like 50,000 going for the 26 races on the grid, where like they didn't get podiums and all of that kind of stuff, and I'm like, for goodness sake, how did that not happen? But he's definitely like the modern era of how on earth did that not happen? But I think he's also thrown away so many chances that he's almost now tarnished as the guy that never can. And that's ultimately what sealed his deal to not go elsewhere. I think he was out of Renault regardless by the end of what he'd done this year. But I think the fact that no one else would touch him is because over the course of the year, Ricciardo has made that team his. Hulkenberg has looked increasingly more bored and disengaged and disinterested as the season has gone on. Almost to the point where it's like spot which German driver's the most emo. Which is a shame because unlike, say, Robert Kubica, who's going to be out and has now decided to change his tact from Williams trying to hamper me to I'm just going to go out and have a good time now, Baj. I think he'll regret being a bit Mizok but at the end of the season because I don't think he is coming back and I don't think he will be touched again, and he should be going off making a very nice sports car career instead. Not IndyCar, which is what some people keep talking about. I don't think he would suit IndyCar at all.
No, me neither. The interesting thing is, he's got a good track record in many other respects. I mean, he's also, let's not forget, a Le Mans winner on merit.
Yeah.
I do see like sports cars or prototypes being the way to go for him. I don't know, I still feel like I would have liked another year or two of him, but hearing you speak about how disengaged he's become, I suppose you've got a fair point. He's talking, though, like I read an interview with him today, and he's talking like he's heading towards a development drive in Formula One, like as a test driver. Now, I don't know who for. Maybe Haas after all.
Well, the latest rumour is Kubica's going to be the Haas development driver.
Yeah, they seem desperate to have him, don't they?
Lots of money now that there is no poor energy drink.
Yeah, and have you noticed how? Shout out to Haas for this. They've been gradually turning their livery back to its old design. I noticed, like on the pit garage, like the gold logo has gone and been replaced with the red and black again, and I was like, oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Speaking of Haas.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, that's the first good start I've had all season. And by good start, I mean one where I haven't completely fucked it. Oh, so scary. So scary.
How is Ricciardo third?
He got a very, very, very good start.
Okay.
I'm quite happy to just sit behind him now and form a roadblock for the cars behind. Someone's just lost part of their wing.
Excellent.
It was black, but that could be either Ricciardo or whoever's in front of you.
Leclerc. I didn't see anything come off behind, and I've not hit him yet.
Yet.
I've decided to go for the hard tyres, by the way, but I'm going to look at how my tyre wear and tyre temps go, and I might switch that to being mediums.
I've done the same.
Oh.
I'm going on to the hards.
Cheeky.
Yeah. Ideally, I would have started on the softs and gone to hards, but sorry, mediums to hards. I nearly crashed my car there. Cost me quite a lot of time correcting myself. Begone, Verstappen. I have no time for your tomfoolery. Right, let's try and brain now. It's always hard at Monaco. I did want to talk about Haas. Kevin Magnussen has become very, very chill. Almost like he's resigned to the fact that his car is a pile of crap. How do you think this is going to affect him going into next year? Do we think Haas can get on top of these problems definitively? Or are we looking at another season with them significantly off the boil and waiting for the formula change before making a decision on whether they continue to participate?
I think they're going to be off the boil next year.
It does look that way, doesn't it?
Because they've not got on the boil this year, and it's carrying over.
I mean, they qualified well, and they do seem to be learning what's wrong with their car. It's just they're not fixing it.
No, and that's my kind of concern is that I was hoping that they would be bringing fixes race to race as they went through the season, rather than if they are just going, oh, well, we're learning for next year. Well, that's not going to be very helpful, because when all the things that you think that you've learned all come together, they've got to all work in sync together on next year's car for it to actually be an improvement. And if it's not, then they're back at square one again. It's been quite heartening, though, to see that Grosjean has woken up a little bit, and has been sometimes actually the lead Haas driver when the car has worked a little bit better, which is quite nice. I don't...
Have you noticed, though, sorry to cut you off, but have you noticed that he only ever does that when it no longer matters?
Yes.
Like, once his seat is confirmed, inevitably, then suddenly he's like, oh, I remember how to drive now.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. He can't be there for 2021, for goodness sake. And it's interesting, actually, because I think that is a team, from my intel that I have of that team anyway, that appears to be We Love K-Mag, who is this Frenchie. And yeah. He's become a bit of an insider joke. And I think they'd much rather just have him on his catering stuff. But yeah, I just don't see it improving, and I think they will look at the 2021 change. And the reason why I think that as well is that the Ferrari has a shit ton of straight line speed, but is not quite as good as the Mercedes or the Red Bulls in the corners. And where do they get some of their legacy bits from?
Yes.
Ferrari. And so that is going to be the problem. And also, Alfa Romeo Sauber having similar issues with their Ferrari engines, because it's they're struggling with stuff too. I just think it's systematic of hand-me-downs.
Yeah, although, to be honest with you, I could see Sauber making progress again next year.
Oh, definitely.
Another team I could see going forward still would be Toro Rosso as well. I mean, they've really impressed me the last few years, particularly when they were able to take advantage of James Key. Now they don't have their own technical director. You could argue that's going to be a setback, but taking more support from Red Bull directly, I don't think is going to be painful for them. And, you know, having the two teams aligned on the same power unit is already a big benefit, something that they've not always had. Because if you remember, it always used to be Red Bull, Renault and Toro Rosso, Ferrari, which always baffled me.
Yeah, I never quite understood that either. It was almost like they were trying to weigh up which one was the best one, and I was always expecting like a weird switcheroo from one season to the next of like, actually, we've worked out that one's better, bye, and give it to Red Bull.
Yeah. Well, that's normally how they operate, isn't it?
Yep.
I'm going through my tyres very quickly. So I honestly think we've done right by picking the hards.
Ah, Leclerc. Ah, I'm out.
Oh, boys. I hit Ricardo and lost half my front wing.
Someone then hit my ghost as well. That was my fault, really. I stuck my nose in on Leclerc. He then went wide, so I then went for it into the chicane, and he just cut across. Like Seb.
There's a bunch of cars stuck still. It's my race buggered as well, because I've had a wing change, and I'm dead last by quite some way.
You got Vettel behind you.
These
I know that doesn't really help.
These tyres have to last me now. Well, sorry for your loss.
Yeah, lol.
No,
we get to see a lot of you on the stream. Be good.
No safety car?
No, God knows how. My car was splattered across the track and several other people had hit me. Don't know how Hamilton is down in 13th. I think he might have been the driver that weirdly hit my ghost or something.
I don't know why I didn't brake, but I came out of the corner, saw you and Ricardo like blocking the track, and just realised, well, I have nowhere to go. You ghosted, but Ricciardo didn't. It still should have been a crash that would have ended my race, but it didn't, so there we go.
Boom. The only good thing is that Giovinazzi is in sixth and the entire grid is just stuck behind him in a massive train. So if you're faster than the Alpha, you'll start reeling them in. In fact, you are. You've already had half a second of Lando so far this lap. So I reckon there is good points in there for you yet if those tyres can last.
Sexy. You can race engineer me now.
Yes.
Speaking of Giovinazzi, that is a man who's received a new contract.
He has. I'm quite pleased.
See, for me, the jury is still out.
I think... I guess this depends on quite where we think Kimi Raikkonen is in terms of his peak/trough graph ascension crash to pit. Because for me, there's still some times where Giovinazzi just seems to go AWOL mid-race. Over a single lap, I think he's clearly got it. And he's actually said as well that he's been quite annoyed at some of his mid-race pace because that's where he falls away from Raikkonen, whereas he has much more consistency over the course of a race distance. He does not. But I think over the second half of the season, he's kind of shown that actually he can sit onto the back of Raikkonen and still do a pretty good job, and I'd be quite happy with that. Probably on his salary, punching at that weight, doing quite good. He'll never get in a Ferrari, ever in a million years. But I think he has the potential to do some decent stuff. And what was also really interesting was Frederick Vasseur kicking both of them in a press conference, saying they keep throwing away points that we should be having, and so does the team, and I'm really unimpressed with this. So Brazil was quite timely. He was quite punchy. He was like, Raikkonen's crashed and caused lots of problems. And then the jump start at Russia was amateur hour. And then Giovinazzi threw away the points at Spa on the last lap. And there was somewhere else as well where he was running in the points and then just like, I think it was a crap pit stop, and then he ended up down at the back. So yeah, just it's like they've kind of gone, or not forgotten how to be a midfield team, because they clearly showed that they could do that last year with ease. But it's just weird, like it's always the Alpha team that gets the weird, didn't you remember that rule? Kind of weird penalty / qualification. What do you mean we've got to start with all 4 tyres on the same compound? That kind of shit. You think, really? You're well eaten into the gap, by the way.
Oh, this is fantastic news. I thought I was knackered.
You've chopped 2 seconds off.
Oh, smashing.
In a lap and a bit.
Smashing. I guess I've got Giovinazzi to thank for this, right?
Yeah, although he's only a couple of seconds off of Albon because Perez is in 4th some fuckery how. So, no, you're all right.
Can we talk about Mr. Albon?
Of course we can.
Because what a revelation that boy's been, eh? I mean, that's one of the stories of the year for me as well. He is a boy who was on the scrap heap. Dr. Marco says, I hate him, he's a prick. Not interested in him at all. I think he smells. Honestly, I think he wets the bed. He's not a Red Bull driver, all that kind of stuff. He signs for the Nissan Formula E team. I thought, okay, that's the end of his time in sort of, the classic open wheel ladder. But, maybe it's for the best. That's, good night, sweet prince. Then Ricciardo drops his bombshell. Suddenly he's called up for Toro Rosso out of the blue. Delivers some great drives for Toro Rosso. Gasly drops the ball, ends up in a seat at the top team. Despite starting last on more than one occasion, finishes in the top 6 in all 7 races.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, and just completely bosses it. And he's such a nice guy as well. Did you hear his interview after he lost his first career podium? He was so serene about it. I was like, I like you, Alex Albon. I want to take you home to meet my mum.
Yes, yes, I know what you mean. He is mummyable. Um,
Like George Russell.
yes, yes, I
George Russell is
agree.
more
I
about the
agree.
hair. George Russell has your mum would approve hair.
Yeah, he would be the third out of four in the boy band.
Yeah.
The one who you don't think is going to take you into a corner behind a bush and probably give you some
Ah, shit.
uh-ohs. I'm diving back. I'm diving back. Are you still all in one piece? Yes. Good, good.
Just an end plate, but I can feel it.
Uh-oh. You're under 10 seconds now from Norris, so that's good.
This is good pace, actually, considering I'm on the hard tyre.
Yeah. I think when they all pit and come back out again, you might actually end up back in sixth. Because they're all about 2 or 3 laps away. Oh no, the front lot are. Everyone else is on mediums, so except for Giovinazzi on the side.
Oh, well, that helps me even more, right? Because
yeah, so you're going to catch up to them and then
pass them in the pits, which is sexy news.
You just have to drive super wide.
Yeah.
I'm really, really pleased with Albon. The only thing that slightly concerns me is nowhere near there quite in quali yet, and I'm sure that will come hopefully compared to Verstappen, and just the need to have a clean weekend. Don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying watching him come back up through the field because it's provided mucho entertainment, but it would be lovely if he could just chill for 5 minutes. Giovinazzi's in, so I'll keep an eye out on where he's going to be with you. But yeah, I just want him to have some clean weekends so that he can be like, oh, okay, I can start 5th or 6th and finish 5th or 6th.
So we can actually see what he's capable of, right?
Yeah. Brazil was about as close to that as you can get. If you get Perez. Fuck off.
Yeah. That's...
Mexi can't.
Yeah, that's what happens with the AI in this game. That's just what they do.
How is the car?
Awful. But maybe I can make it work. Confirm change. Copy that. Was that me though? Did I drift over?
No, you know where the barriers kind of squiggle.
Yeah.
I couldn't see whether he was ahead or behind because I was watching it from the top of the hill, but they make no attempt to back out or anything, so it all feels a bit awkward and weird.
I was ahead. That much I do know. I just wasn't sure if it was him moving or me. I mean, I don't feel like it was me, but
I think it would have been him then, because you was in the middle of the road and then he just didn't back it out.
Yeah, I was going to stay out because I could keep it on the track, but then coming out of the swimming pool, I was like, I can't stay on the power, so I'm going to lose all my time. So in we come. Never mind. Another year where I don't get any points at Monaco. I really thought, actually, I was starting to believe for the first time I get some good points here. I need to start eating into your lead.
Let's get some heat into those tires.
Because you're on 77 points to my 25.
Don't.
I've been very mercurial this year. 1 win and then a bunch of DNFs.
So you can do a Jean-Eric Verne for the second half of this season and end up getting podium after podium and yoinking it right at the end. Albon leading the way actually in that Red Bull.
Back to him. I wanted to say before Perez so rudely interrupted us, I actually think him not having clean races has been what's done him the most favours.
Because it's shown him what he can do against Gasly, who started in the midfield, stayed in the midfield in that car.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, what he's demonstrated is I can cut through the field and make this car work. Because if he qualified 6th, finished 6th, right, which would be perfectly respectable and better than Gasly was doing, he wouldn't look as good as he does. But the fact that he's had to deal with starting last and a bunch of penalties and all kinds of things, and he's been able to get the car back up into some decent points, and to score more points than Max since the break, up until the last Grand Prix, like that's a huge deal. Gasly was nowhere near achieving that. That said, credit where it's due. Gasly and Toro Rosso, that is a match made in heaven, isn't it?
And I wonder why. What's the guy in charge? Franz Tost basically said, I'm sure it was him and not Christian Horner, that the Toro Rosso car is much easier to drive, and that is why Gasly works so well in that car, because the Red Bull is more, because it's faster and more like knife edgy, you have to have more talent to drive it. And I was like, I don't think you meant it like that, because that's the most weirdest backhanded compliment smash round the face at the same time that you could possibly give your driver, who then would go on to finish second in the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yeah, and possibly save your team about 10 million euros.
Yeah, it was such a weird thing to say, and I thought, I don't think you meant it like that, but okay.
He probably did. You know what Red Bull are like.
That's true. But it's fascinating that Gasly could not get that Red Bull to work. And it is making me worried, actually, for Daniel Kvyat in some ways, because of the disparity between Gasly's peaks and Kvyat's like tempered bubble. Yeah, because he's consistent and will get those 8th, 9th, 10ths. But if you've got Gasly going 2nd, 5th, 12th, 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 everyone, a bit like when we said it last year with the Bahrain race, everyone was like, yeah, but 4th in Bahrain, yeah, bro. In 2018, when actually he would then disappear for 6 or 7 races and you never hear from him again. But everyone remembered that one race. He's gone and done it again. And I'm like, so, yeah, very fascinating. But I'd be very interested, actually, if, say, Verstappen went off somewhere else, or Albon was deemed to be not up to scratch, if Gasly would even say, yes, I'll go back to Red Bull.
Well, the first thing I'll say is you are correct in the analysis of the two cars, because it's something Albon said after his first session in the Red Bull. He said that the Toro Rosso is far easier to drive. The Red Bull has a much narrower operating window, and once you get it into that, it's a far better car. But outside of it, it's just not. It just doesn't work. And that was what his worry was. Going forward, that he wasn't entirely sure if he could consistently keep the car in the operating window. And you did see that in his early races in particular, right? Do you remember he used to...
Yeah.
He'd have strong starts, a really weak middle, and then come good at the end. Because there was a lot of time I'd be watching to see where he was in the standings and be like, oh no, he's down in 12th. And then suddenly by the end of the Grand Prix, he's, up in the top 6. So that makes a lot of sense to me as well, because we saw it like historically. Oh shit! Historically, sort of championship winning and contending cars have always been like that. The Mercedes car has always been labelled a diva. I have a question for you. I have the fastest lap, but I'm not going to be in the top 10 by the end of this Grand Prix. I guess the extra point is awarded to the guy with the next fastest lap?
No one gets it.
Oh, well, I that kind of makes me feel better in a sort of Schadenfreude kind of way.
Yeah. Scrooge it, bitches.
It's really odd. I have such good pace over a single lap at this track. And actually, in this Toro Rosso, with this setup, I actually feel like I'm getting really strong pace generally. But I've never had that before. This game, just to derail us from it, this game has turned a lot on its head for me, because I've become very, very bad in the wet, which historically I've never had. And then all the tracks I've struggled with previously, I've suddenly become competitive on. And tracks that I've always been good at, I'm starting to struggle with. So I've always been quite fast at Bahrain, but in this version of the game, I just cannot drive it. I lose a whole bunch of time in sectors 1 and 3. I have the same problem in Hungary. I've always been good at Hungary, and now I'm left Hungary for points. Snark, snark. Yet suddenly I can bash it out at Silverstone without even thinking. And Monaco is a lot easier for me. But, you know, I say that, but actually, if you recall, I've got a really mercurial record at Baku. I'm really fast around Baku on 1 lap, but if you expect me to string 10 of them together, then I'm going to DNF. And 3 years now, I've nearly won Baku and crashed every time.
That is true. That is true.
I have to work on that.
This game has grown on me as well. I remember at the very beginning, I was really anti this game.
You were. It was the first time, actually, I remember you really disliking a version of the game.
It's kind of grown on me over time. I have to say, I get much more enjoyment still, I think, out of the Formula 2 cars because of how sensitive you have to be with the throttle. And they just feel more alive to me. Whereas these cars, I don't know, maybe... I don't think they feel like too arcadey because they absolutely aren't. But yeah, I don't know. There's still something that just feels a little bit clunky and maybe too heavy for me with these.
I agree with you. I was just thinking of saying that the cars do feel heavy, but they also feel planted. Like I don't have the situations where I break traction like I used to.
Yeah.
So it does make them very easy to drive in a lot of respects, although I find the wheel-to-wheel racing a lot harder because the cars are so fat. And I keep going for gaps that seem to be there and then, like, you know, catching the real wheels on somebody.
Yes, because beforehand you'd kind of be able to go, right, well, if I can see my chassis getting through it, I know I can fit through it, and I don't feel like that's the case in this game sometimes.
No, it's not. It really isn't. The cars are very fat. But in a way, I kind of like it. I mean, I do like being able to look back over all the years we've been doing this and actually be able to compare the cars and so on. That's something that you never see drivers being asked, actually. You know, what's the best car you've ever driven? You know, because some would always, you know, I'm sure Jenson Button will always say, oh, it was the Brawn, whether or not that was actually the case. Because, you know, having a car that suits you better doesn't necessarily mean it's fast enough to win a championship. Which reminds me, before we get on to Formula E, because I know we're both raring to talk about that, and we don't have a lot of laps left to do it. We had some questions come in, and I was supposed to bring them up in the last episode, and I didn't because I forgot.
Disgusting.
So, one question that came in that I thought could be quite fun to answer for both of us. If we were actual F1 drivers, which driver from the past and which driver from the present would we most like to have as a teammate?
Ooh.
And that's quite a fun question, I think, because do you go along the lines of a driver you think you get along with, or a driver that you think you could beat? A driver that you think could... I mean, and we're talking... you know, beat in terms of our skills in the game, because obviously neither of us can drive an F1 car competently. It was a very interesting question for me. And it's one I'm struggling to answer.
Albon's going to win this race, by the way. We've talked about so much. He's just pitted and come out just in front of Kubica, who's holding up everyone who's stopped. I almost feel like I want to go for like favourite drivers, but then I feel like that would be like a really terrible answer, because I'd be like, bring me Luca Badoer, I want that man. Or if I was to look good, there is something in me that's like, bring me the Taki in a way. And that would be quite good. But then I'd also be absolutely fascinated to have someone like Jim Clark.
Yeah.
Because with no assists, no driver aids, no anything whatsoever, watching the mastery that they did painting the circuit with that car, my goodness, I'd be in awe, whilst also looking like a complete incompetent fool all at the same time. So,
Yeah.
like, there's lots of me that kind of goes, From a current driver, I mean, if he was playing in game, Daniel Ricciardo, because he could just dive bomb everyone, and then that'd be half the field wiped out.
Yeah.
that'd be quite good. And I can poodle around and win something. Plus, I can imagine that it could be Lando Norris, because I'd want to know what his sim racing rig was like, actually.
Yeah, you could sim race together, like he does with Carlos.
Yeah.
You'd be best buds.
Get him on a bit of iRacing, watch my iRating drop like a stone. and I'd imagine, actually, that his gaming pad would be a good laugh, and you'd end up with a healthy amount of dominoes and booze. So that's my vague answer.
Like it very much.
What about you?
For me, out of past drivers, I actually briefly gave thought to David Coulthard, because he's a solid number 2 that would allow me to assert myself. But also, I really like cheese, and I could use his chin to slice cheddar. So that I like that he's got sort of 2 aspects that he brings to the table. But actually, when I really think about it, I think that I would be quite happy to be partnered with probably Jensen, because he's someone that I think I could get along with, but at the same time someone who would push me. And I think that's the combination you need. Either him or...
Yeah, like it.
I'm trying to avoid just going to the 90s by default. So the other one... the other one that came to mind for me is Gerhard Berger, though.
Oh, yes. That's a good shout, because I'm sure it was his Beyond the Grid episode where he was talking about all of the pranks that he used to do on other drivers.
Yeah.
I'd imagine he'd be a good laugh.
Exactly. Me and old Gerhard having a bit of a giggle.
Up in a helicopter playing Dare.
Hungry hippos in the back of a limo. If I was talking about a driver on the grid today that I think could offer the same sort of thing, it'd be between Albon and Georgie Russell. Because I think both of them offer that balance of someone I could get along with and someone who would push me to improve. Carlos Sainz, you could arguably put in that category, but I think he'd just wipe the floor with me and then I'd get demoralised and cry. Plus, I wouldn't want to look in the mirror and just feel completely inferior every time with the way how he wakes up with perfect hair. Yeah, his hair is always perfect, and he is the smoothest of operators, which would make me... It would make me lament that I wasn't such a smooth operator. Now, the second part of the question was reversed. By BT. Was reversed, and we were asked if you could put the other host into any team at any time and pick their teammate, where would you put them and with who? And I really love that question.
I started to catch the car in front, but we need to look after the tyres.
Where could you see them? I'll let you ponder about it, because I've had some time to think about this.
Okay.
And you were actually harder than I would have imagined, because there's quite a few teams that I could imagine you in. Are
they all back of the grid?
No, not all of them, actually. Because the thing is, for all your joking and everything, I actually think... I mean, certainly the years we've been doing this, I think you're very good, actually. I actually thought about putting you at Old School Lotus.
Ooh.
Old School Lotus, but probably 80s Lotus, with Olivier Panis.
Ooh.
Or at Super Aguri. And in that instance, I would partner you with perennial mid-grid man Heinz-Hauer Frentzen, who we talk about all the time on the show. But I could see you and Frentzen as like the dream team. I really could.
Yeah. 4.5 seconds off the pace, living the dream. Loving
Exactly.
That. Yeah, they both sound really good actually. If he was going for a 80s Lotus, I'd quite like the ones where it was the orange ones in the later 80s where it was Camel sponsored.
Yeah.
The ones that
The turbo Lotuses, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking about.
Because they just look like someone's got the massivest sausage and then just drenched it in mustard and gone, there we go, drive that. Yes. Oh no, I quite like those. I see now. There's a bit of me that says I'd quite like to see you in, but this is kind of mild pandering. I'd like to see you in maybe the 1997 Arrows, but with Diniz as your teammate, not Hill.
Whoa, yes please. That's gone right up my flagpole.
But not with the 97 livery, the Orange Arrows livery.
Yes, of course. Of course.
So whip the livery off that, stick it on the 97 Arrows, having you and Diniz in there going at its hammer and tongs.
Dinner's in the oven.
Yes. You're only 4 seconds off Lando, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to say, emergency broadcast, I don't know how it's happened, but I appear to have caught people up.
And it's because Perez is in 10th, going all the way, a very long way, on medium tyres that look knackered. I think he might have hurt his wing, actually, because he's 7 seconds off K-Mag now.
I hope he has. I want to hurt his wing. Actually, he should still be on the wing that he used to take me out, so it probably is.
I'm trying to have a look. Yeah, he's missing an end plate. That's why.
Right, we want to talk Formula E. There's just one thing I want to do before we do that. And normally I don't do stuff like this, and I want to just reassure everybody, I've not been paid to say this or anything like that, but I want to recommend to everybody, go and sign up for Audible, because you get your first book for free, and get either of the Alan Partridge books. Because I have not laughed so hard at an audiobook ever.
Okay.
Alan Partridge is an incredible character.
Yes.
But his autobiography, I Partridge, We Need to Talk About Alan, or his book Nomad, properly hilarious beginning to end. And I sense a bit of a Martin Brundle about him in some of the things that he says, so it tickles me. So I just wanted to shout out that to everybody. Go out and get it, you won't regret it. That rhymes, wasn't intentional.
Hey.
Getting back onto motorsport. And one other thing. If, like Simon, you didn't really get into this game, I just wanted to say I'm on the 4th season now of my career mode, and the game's come alive, and I'm really enjoying it. The grid's all fucked up. I'm in a really tight battle. All the cars are fairly evenly matched. We had a regulation change, doofer. But I'm locked in a championship battle that's genuinely providing a lot of fun. And the patches to the game, I think, have made it a lot better. So do stick with it. I'm thinking of going back to Williams next year because I love the livery. I may go back to live streaming it.
Oh, cool. Manor House has popped in the chat. He loves Partridge on the day-to-day.
Yeah, the day-to-day. That's classic Partridge. I still think knowing you is funnier, all in all. But yeah, the Partridge humour in that show is a bit more subtle. My favourite line, though, is in the very first episode, where they're doing a piece on seals, and he does a link, and he's like, joining us now is seal expert Jessica Clunt, And then she goes, actually, it's Jessica Fluck. And he just looks at the camera and is like, oh, yeah, I know what I did there. And I didn't get it at first, but then it suddenly hit me and I pissed my pants laughing. So please do go and watch that.
Superb.
Yeah, getting on to Formula E. We want to talk about Formula E. I am very excited for Formula E.
I am too.
And I have got some hot tips.
Just a tip.
Just a tip. My tip is, I could actually see Jean-Eric Vergne making a run on the title again, to be quite frank. I think it's his to lose, because I really do see DS and Techeetah as together, considering they only switched to DS last season. But that's a team that seems to have its head screwed on. But potential challengers, I'd actually tip BMW to be the team they most need to be looking in their rear view mirrors at. I'm not sure if Virgin can keep up the pace they've had, which is a shame because Virgin is my team. But also, keep an eye on Andre Lotterer in the Porsche, because I don't know why, I just have a good feeling in my waters about him.
Well, Porsche, it's very rare that they take on something and then absolutely cluster muck it up. I know it's their first time. I was watching, I don't know, actually a live show on YouTube today, Formula E, which was part of the shakedown at Iduria, or however you say it, where they all get to do 3 laps at half power just to kind of shake down the new cars whilst they talked about them. And Jack Nicholls was saying that it's the first time in over 30 years that Porsche have done a single-seater car, like open cockpit, well, not open cockpit, but that type of car for racing. So it's a huge new thing for them. But like everyone's already like, well, we expect them to be up to speed by about race 3.
Yeah, but it's such a competitive formula that I could totally see that. I don't think it's as hard to enter as a lot of others, and I think the manufacturers that have joined now have timed it perfectly. You know, they waited and saw what was going on with the series as a whole. Right, I've caught everyone up while running on lean fuel and low deployment of power. And now I'm stuck in a train, and I don't know how I'm going to get past them all, because you can't take over drivers on this track. It's not possible.
That is true, which is annoying because Perez is running about 1.8 seconds slower than the people in front of him. So, like, super slow. But yeah, as soon as you go for one car, you're smack into the next one. So, good luck.
Thanks.
For watching it.
Are they? No pressure then. Are they going to pit again? Any of those cars in front of me?
No.
Shitballs.
And they're on mixed. Most of them are on hard tyres, apart from Hamilton and.
Why am I not getting
Perez,
DRS?
actually.
I'm not getting the DRS.
I think he was over a second at the trigger.
Lame.
Not now, though. Yeah, I struggle to see who's going to win this title. I think it's going to be really interesting that so they've increased the power that they've got on the boost pads, as I call them, not the activation thing, so that you get an extra 10
kilowatts.
Yeah, compared to what you did last time, which is going to make that a bit more powerful. They've got more power in general as well. Yeah, I agree with Manor in the chat. The tracks, most of them are god awful. There's a couple on there that are quite nifty, but I'm super intrigued to see how it will go. I was looking actually, talking about Price Watch. You were saying when at the Berlin ones just how cheap it all is. The prices have come out for the London one, and I was looking at it, and it's £15 for the day if you're disabled, but if you're not disabled, it's 50.
Wow, that I'm almost certain it wasn't that expensive last year. But I mean, they're selling out so quickly now. I expected the tickets to go up this year. I did, but that's. I mean, that's still very reasonable.
Oh yeah, for a day's entertainment, it's good because it's got the circus behind. What annoys me about the London one is that they've put all of the seats are just in a massive section in the centre of the track, so you only see the start, finish straight, and turn one. And then if you want to go and sit at turn one, I think it's £100 for the day. And then I think you can like get a discount if you do like the double day thing. But yeah, all of the like overtaking points, apart from the general turn one carnage that will happen at a Formula E event, they're all outside the Excel Centre, and there's no tickets for that, which is I feel is a bit limited or weird. But maybe it's just logistics. It's difficult around the Excel Centre to kind of do other stuff. But yeah, intrigued.
But Berlin has the same problem. Like Berlin's quite a good track, I think, but
oh yeah,
you don't get seating where you want it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could have been better designed, and I know part of that is because they want to give people the pit lane seating.
Yeah.
And you can sit down at turn one, which is where we normally sit.
Uh-huh.
But weirdly, I've not seen an accident at all the Berlin events I've been to, which is part of the reason I go. I've seen some lockups, but not much else. To be honest with you, I think the quality of racing in Formula E generally is very good, but I'd be lying if I said the racing I saw in front of my eyes, given where the seats are, was riveting. That would be wrong of me to say.
Sure.
It's just not true.
Do you have access to screens and stuff though whilst you're sitting there?
Yeah, you get screens and commentary.
Cool.
But I mean, I keep inviting you. You've got to finally come and join for one.
No, I know.
Because the weather's always so good. And there's beer and tons of really great street food, and it's so cheap. It's so cheap. €5 for a day ticket we've been paying.
I do intend, I promise.
Which, in your money is about, well, it used to be about £4, but probably now it's about £5. Shit!
Oh!
Are you alright?
Oh! I took my eye off the ball for just a second. I was getting cramp in my hand. Never mind. I mean, I wasn't going to get past any of those. Anyway. And despite that, I'm actually really happy with that drive, believe it or not. I'm really happy with it. The unexpected pit stop, the running with damage for almost the whole Grand Prix, and the fact that I still managed to catch people up at the rate I did. Very, very pleased with that. Albon didn't win in the end. He dropped to third.
Well, they were all in... when it's done like the we'll fast forward it and AI it, this isn't any of the order of where they were when you crashed out.
Oh.
So it's done that weird, we've simulated it and pretend that overtakes actually happened. So...
Mental. Well, that's another DNF to add to my tally.
Double DNF though, we've not had one of those this year, I think?
No, we had loads last year.
Yeah, we were racking them up like...
Again though, it was in the start of the season.
Yeah, and then you kind of get into the swing of it, don't you?
And interestingly, I still finished in the exact same place I was.
Hey!
So crashing out made no difference. Thank you very much to everyone who watched and commented and took some time to hang out with us. We will see you in 2 weeks on Saturday, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which will be our Christmas special.
I think it will. Might not be on the Saturday. I'll have to triple check. I've got a 2-year-old birthday. My niece's 2 turns 2, and so we're having a 2-year-old trying to apply some wonderful merchandise of a gaming variety on it, I'm sure. Yes. Yeah, I'll triple check. But yeah, probably 2 weeks. I'm going to shut up now.
Yes, all that remains. Thank you to everyone who watched. Sorry for the double DNF, but hopefully the chatteroo kept you entertained. We might not see you on Saturday then, but it will be in 2 weeks from now, and that will be our last episode pre-Christmas. So go out and buy your gifts now, and maybe get some mulled wine on the go, and we'll have some giggles in 2 weeks' time. Take care of yourselves. We love you. Bye.
Bye.